Well, good morning. My name is Mark, and for the past few weeks, we have been talking about what does it look like to make wise decisions in our lives. A few weeks ago when I was hosting, I told you I've made more than my fair share of questionable decisions in my life, like eating too many tacos in one setting, going down the Black Diamond ski slopes when I was just learning how to ski, and running a marathon without properly training. All really poor decisions, right? They did not work out well for me. They did not play out well for me. And some of those decisions that I made had impacts that lasted for days, some of them even weeks. Fortunately, it was nothing that I couldn't overcome eventually. However, what I found was that the decisions that we make on a daily basis help shape our lives. Our decisions determine the direction and the quality of our lives. And many times, we are the result of the decisions that we make. Now, that doesn't mean that we're defined by those decisions, especially the poor decisions that we make in life. But whether we like it or not, our decisions help shape who we are. And sometimes, there are consequences that come with those decisions that may stay around a lot longer than eating too many tacos at one time. There are other times that somebody else's decisions affect us. And then we respond to those decisions, which also are decisions that we make ourselves. But ultimately, our decisions are like the steering wheel of our life. They guide us and lead us into a specific direction. And when we get decision making right in our life, many times we get life right, don't we? I think that's what this whole series really has been all about. This Wise Up series, that we're talking about how to make better decisions, that we want to be able to live life to the fullest. I think all of us would agree with that. The way that Jesus intended for us. He said that I came so that you could have life and have it to the absolute fullest. And one of the best ways for us to do that, to have this life that Jesus calls us to have and wants us to have, is for us to make better decisions with our life and have fewer regrets. But how do we do that? In particular, today, we want to ask the question, how do we have wisdom when it comes to our money? Now, if you're new here, you're new listening online, before you get this idea like, oh, great, I came to church today and they're going to talk about money and how the church can get more money and we can get more. That is not what this is about at all. But we think that in light of the state of the world that we're in light of the economic downturn in recent months, we think it's a good idea to take a look at what does wisdom look like when it comes to our personal finances. And some practical ideas that come directly from God's word on how we can make better decisions when it comes to our money. Now, before we start, I think it's good to point out that Jesus had a lot to say about money. When Jesus was doing his ministry, he told somewhere between 35 and 40 parables, stories that would illustrate a point. And around 16 of those parables dealt directly with money. But none of the parables that Jesus told talked about how he could get your money. He didn't do that. Instead, he focused on how can you handle money well so that money doesn't consume you, so that it doesn't control you. Jesus was after something, but it wasn't your money. Jesus wants something for us. He doesn't want something from us. He wanted to help people have richer, fuller lives. Now, since we're working through the book of Proverbs in this series, we're going to take a look there today. And we're going to be going kind of a bunch of different places, and so the passages of Scripture will be on the screen for you to follow along. But we've been taking a look through this book and taking a look at the words of Solomon, who most believe was the wisest person ever to live. And Solomon had a lot to say about money as well, specifically about wealth and poverty and about such things as generosity and greed, and how do we stay wise when it comes to our money. So let's start at the beginning, and maybe this is a question that some people ask themselves or they ask about others. Is it sinful to be wealthy? Well, in short, no. Solomon says it's not, but he also offers some pretty big warnings when it comes with this idea. And so we start off in Proverbs chapter 18, verse 11, and Solomon says this: the rich think their wealth will protect them. They think that it's a strong fortress. I mean, there's a degree of security that comes with our wealth, right? It comes with having money. Money can provide things that we need: a roof over our head, clothing, food, the basic necessities of life. I mean, money can help us provide that for us, but it can also provide for us things that maybe we don't necessarily need, but maybe things that we want, like the finer things in life. But wealth does not provide everything for us. I mean, we're really good at accumulating stuff, aren't we? I mean, just collecting things. I mean, do you know what one of the most lucrative investments you could make right now, today in the United States is? Storage units, right? Storage units. I mean, we have so much stuff that we can't even keep it in our houses, that we pay somebody else to store all of our things in a 10 by 12 room. I mean, if you don't believe me, just the next time you drive through town, just count how many storage units are around town, and the ones that have popped up in places and businesses that have went out of business. But why do we have so much stuff? Why do we accumulate so much? I think it was Billy Graham who said, "I've never seen a U-Haul behind a hearse," right? I mean, we can't take it with us when we go. And so Solomon also expounds on that idea a little bit, and he says, our wealth can't save us from death either. In Proverbs 11:28, he says, whoever trusts his riches will fall, but the righteous thrive like a green leaf. And so Solomon is giving us this idea, and he goes on and he says, if we are to become wealthy, you should do it honestly. Okay, that makes sense, right? But if we're going to become wealthy, he also says this, that we should earn our wealth over a long period of time, as opposed to getting rich quick, right? And we've all known or seen, or maybe we've got sucked into some of those get-rich-quick schemes. I don't know. Does that mean that I can't play the multi-billion-dollar Powerball right now? I mean, hey, maybe that's a question that we'll talk about here in just a little bit. But the truth is this: we might have to ask some tough questions of ourselves if we want to be wise with our finances. In Proverbs 23, Solomon also advises us not to overwork to become rich, right? Some of us, and maybe you've known other people, right, work so hard to attain wealth, and you work double shifts and overtime and all this stuff to accumulate. And one day you wake up and see that everyone that you ever cared about is gone, and you didn't even realize that they had left. Maybe the stock market is where you've put your trust. And we all know that that can be iffy, right? And maybe some of you have even experienced that, where all the money that you had saved up for retirement, and the stock market crashes and it's gone. Wealth can be a blessing, but it can also easily become a curse. And wisdom can make the difference when it comes to how we handle and manage our money. Some, on the other hand, live in poverty, which can also be a result of decision-making, sometimes poor decision-making. And sometimes poverty comes, and it's circumstances that are beyond our control, right? Sometimes it's the greed of others, right? Those who are willing to increase their wealth off the backs of others. And Solomon tells us this. He says in Proverbs 22:7, he says, the rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is a slave to the lender, which is why we should do everything we can to stay out of debt. Because Solomon says, when you go into debt, when you borrow for somebody else, basically what Solomon's saying is they own you. Until you can pay that debt off, they own you. And Solomon goes on, and he tells us different ways that we can become poor from our own decisions. Sometimes it's laziness. Sometimes we choose not to work, even though we can work to earn a living. Maybe it's refusing correction. Maybe we have people in our lives who try to help us, who try to give us wise counsel, give us warnings, and we refuse to listen to them. Solomon says that pleasure seeking and drunkenness can lead to poverty. Those addictions that we have, whether it's gambling all of our extra money away because I just know I'm going to hit it big the next time, right? Or maybe it's some other addiction that nobody even knows about, but it's slowly draining our bank accounts. And these things, Solomon says, can lead to us being poor and maybe even in poverty. And again, sometimes poverty is not always self-inflicted. Sometimes it's things that happen that are beyond our control. Natural disasters, hurricanes, tornadoes, whatever it might be, theft, so on, right? Now, most of us in here, most of us watching online, we probably don't fall below the poverty line. So what can Proverbs teach us about wisdom with the use of our money? One of the wisest things that we can do, Solomon says, regarding our money is to be generous. And let me just say, you all are some of the most generous people that I've ever been around. I've been in church for 47 years. And you all are some of the most generous people. Pastor Dane talked about it when we did our Be Rich campaign a couple weeks ago. In just 2 weeks' time, we raised over $31,000 to give to people who are helping those in need. And I just think that's awesome. A month ago, there were 25 of us or 30 of us somewhere around there that ran the Chicago Marathon to raise money for clean water. And we raised over $60,000 to help people have clean drinking water. And you all are a part of that. You get it. It's awesome. That's the generosity. And Solomon tells us this: he who gives to the poor will lack nothing. Now, that feels countercultural, doesn't it? That feels countercultural because we live in a world that says, hey, store up as much as you can for yourself, as much as you can, because if I don't look out for myself, who's going to look out for me? So I need to get mine. I need to make sure I got mine. John Wesley, one of our founding fathers of the church, when it came to money, Wesley had some things to say as well. And he said 3 things you should do when you're considering your personal finances. And the first thing is this: he said, you should gain all you can. Get as much as you can. And then the second thing he said, save as much as you can. Don't spend it on frivolous things. You just save as much as you can. And then the third thing he said was this: give as much as you can. Now, that may mean different things for different people, right? How much I can save and how much I can give may look different from somebody else, and how much they can save and how much they can give. But if we would all give as much as we can, as Wesley suggests, my guess is there would be a whole lot less poverty in the world that we live in. And it goes even beyond that, though. Solomon says there are natural benefits of being generous. And he says in Proverbs 11:17, he says, the merciful man does good for his own soul. I don't know if you know this about me or not. I know I've shared it before, but maybe you're new. I'm an only child. And so I've heard all the jokes about being an only child and what that means and all that stuff. And most of it's true, right? And it took me a while to understand this concept of being generous. And I think it was after I had kids of my own that as I've gotten older, I've found that it is so much more enjoyable to give than it is to receive. Does generosity come easily to me? No, it doesn't. But I've tried to practice it, and I've tried to keep doing it, and the more I do it, and the more I do it, what I've found is the more I practice, the easier it becomes. And Solomon's right. I've found it to be true in my own life, that the more I give, it is better for my soul. Now, on the flip side of generosity is greed, right? And again, we find warnings that Solomon gives us about money. And again, it's the opposite of what the world would tell us is true. The opposite of generosity is greed. And greed rots the soul. It brings nothing but trouble. There was a book that was written not too long ago called The Paradox of Generosity. And in it, Christian Smith says this: happiness can be a result of not spending more on oneself, but rather giving away to others. And that is a paradox in our world. We are told over and over by advertisers, when we're watching TV, the commercials that we see, when we're listening to the radio, the advertisements that we hear, when we're scrolling through social media and things pop up on the ads, it says, if you want to be happy, you should get that new car. You should get that new iPhone. You need that new iPhone, right? You should go on that vacation, even if you can't afford it, because you deserve it. You've worked hard. You deserve the nicer things. But many times when the opportunity comes maybe to give to those in need or to serve those in need, we pause a little bit more because maybe there's not something in it for me. So what do? How do we move forward and make wise decisions with our money that isn't going to leave us broke? And what will help us have a better life ultimately? In a book called Better Decisions, Fewer Regrets, Andy Stanley offers some practical questions that we can ask ourselves that will help us make better decisions. And when we make better decisions, as a result, we have fewer regrets in our lives. We can make better decisions when we ask the right questions and act accordingly, because our decisions are no better than the questions that we ask ourselves. And it's true about most decisions that we make on a daily basis, but it's especially true when it comes to our money. And here's the truth. We're all really good at sales. You may not know this, but we are, right? I want you to think about it. We're all really good at being salesmen when it comes to selling ourselves on really bad ideas, right? We can do that all the time. We rarely have to sell ourselves on good ideas, but bad ideas, we're really good salesmen. Right? I mean, we know when something probably isn't a great idea. It's probably not the best thing for us to do. But we can justify just about anything we want to if we try hard enough, right? I mean, money is so emotional for all of us, for most of us at least, isn't it? We come up with all kinds of reasons why we need this particular thing that we have our eye on. But reality says they're just justifications. They're not necessarily reasons. I still remember in the mid-2000s when iPods came out, right? The newest technology that Apple had at the time. And a few years after the iPod came out, this great new piece of technology came out called the iPod Video. And for $299, I could have an MP3 player and listen to all the music that I think I could handle, and I could watch movies on that screen as well. Only literally the screen was like 2 inches big. I tried to watch a movie on it one time. It was not enjoyable, right? And so I still remember telling my wife all the reasons why I needed to spend over $300 on this iPod Video, even though early on in our marriage, we didn't have really an extra $300 to spend on something like that. I didn't need it. I wanted it, right? This thing is going to be awesome. And I could come up with all the justifications that I needed to convince myself that I needed to make that purchase, even though deep down inside I knew that it probably wasn't the wise thing to do considering our financial situation. And so what are some questions that we can ask ourselves as we go forward to help us make better decisions, wiser decisions when it comes to our money? And even if you're doing okay financially, these questions that we're going to talk about, I think are questions that you can ask in any situation in life and will help you make better, wiser decisions. So the first question that we need to ask is this: why am I doing this? Really? Like, why am I really doing this? Can we be honest with ourselves? Is what the heart of that question. Because being honest with ourselves puts the brakes on a lot of bad spending decisions. And if you can't be honest with yourself, you might want to give somebody permission to be honest with you in your life. And that's not easy to do in most circumstances, right? Because it's really hard when it comes to money. Because like I said before, money is so emotional for us. I worked hard for this money. It's my money. And money's so emotional because our stuff is so emotional. We get our sights set on something that we really, really want. And it's like our hearts, we're so desiring, our hearts say to our brains, hey, we need to come up with some reasons why I need that thing. And then it's just basically justifications. It's not reasons. And we believe the justifications. And then the next thing we know, we think we have a rational argument as to why we need to purchase this thing that we really have no business purchasing. And so when we do that, when our heart tells our brain to think this and we start listening to these reasons and we start rationalizing and justifying, what we're doing is basically lying to ourselves. When you find that you're selling yourself on a bad idea, you might want to tap the brakes. You might want to put a pause there for a moment. And when we do that, it really helps us pause and put the brakes on maybe making a bad spending decision. The next question that we need to ask ourselves is a legacy question. And it's this: what story do I want to tell in my life? What story do I want to tell? As I'm making decisions on a daily basis regarding my finances, what kind of story do I want to tell and what I want to share with people around me? What kind of story do I want to share with my kids or maybe my grandkids? Most of us don't think of our lives in terms of a story. We think about now, what's right here in front of us. What do I want right now? Not what does this decision play out into the future. See, we live in an instant society, right? I mean, we don't have to wait for anything. If you are, 45 years or younger, like you don't remember probably, for the most part, having to wait for a meal, right? If I wanted food, just pop it in the microwave in a couple minutes, boom, there it is, right? If I wanted information, we've got all the information we could ever want right at our fingertips on our phone, and we can have it in a matter of seconds. We don't have to go to the library anymore or find an encyclopedia or whatever. What is an encyclopedia, right? We don't even have to do those things anymore. And then somewhere around the 1950s, credit cards were introduced. They became this thing, and you didn't even have to wait to purchase whatever it was that your heart desired. I still remember when I was a kid, and I might ask my mom, I want a new pair of shoes, or I want a new video game, or something like that. And I remember my mom might say something along the lines, we really don't have the money right now. We really can't afford that right now. And I always remember my reply being to my mom, why can't we just charge it? Just put it on the credit card, right? I mean, I had seen my parents get sucked into that credit card culture and that world. Buy it now, pay for it later. And of course, me being a teenager, I didn't have any idea that using a credit card cost way more because of interest if you didn't pay it off at the end of the month. And I found out a hard truth when I was a teenager and I was in college as I watched my parents scratch and claw their way out of debt because they had fallen into poor spending habits. And it took them a long time, and thankfully they were able to get out of it. But I decided when I watched that, that's not a story that I want to tell. That's not a story I want to tell when I get older. And I decided I don't want to live paycheck to paycheck, just trying to keep up maybe with what everyone else has. I'd rather tell a story and hopefully help my kids understand a valuable lesson, that if you want something, you work hard, you save, and so that you aren't crippled with debt. Now, my kids might tell you that Dad's just cheap. I hope that's not the story that they're hearing. I hope they're hearing a story that says, hey, you can work for something, you can save for it, you don't have to go into debt. And when I can do that, that's a story that I'd be proud to tell my kids and maybe someday my grandkids and whatever that might be. See, we're writing the story of our lives one decision at a time. Do I want to tell a story that I racked up so much debt that I lost my house, I lost my car, maybe I lost a chance to send my kid to the college that they really wanted to go to? I mean, I don't think that sounds like a story that any of us would want to tell. And so when it comes to our money, are we writing a story that we would be proud to tell? The third question that we need to ask is this: is there a tension that deserves my attention? And these are the red flag moments, right? These are the moments that cause us to go, I don't know about that, right? And a lot of times When we make any decision, but especially decisions about our money, we go at it from this angle. Well, this is what everybody else is doing, right? I mean, this is what everyone does. Everyone takes out a huge loan for that car that they really can't afford, or that house that is bigger than maybe what they need. So why shouldn't I? It's what everyone else does. That's just the way the world works, right? I mean, those are the kind of the angles that we go from. And banks are more than happy to lend you that money so that you can pay it back with high interest rates. And it goes back to what Solomon said about being a slave to the lender. But as we allow our Heavenly Father to mold us and shape our conscience, there will be times that hopefully we will look around and we will say something along the lines that maybe this is okay for everyone else, but it just doesn't sit well with me. And in those moments, we need to pay attention to that tension. The problem is, there's usually very little reasoning to support that tension, at least initially. And when we refuse to ignore that attention, or we don't just hurry past it just to get past it, right? If we will sit there for a little while, eventually that tension will begin to make more sense in our lives, and we will be able to make better decisions. And so the question is, as I'm making this decision, especially when it comes to my finances, as I consider this new car, this new home, this rental property, whatever it may be, even if someone else is saying, it's fine, hey, you deserve this, you've worked hard. Even if you have a financial advisor that's saying, yeah, you're good, you can do this, right? We still need to ask the question, is there anything inside of me that is causing me to pause? Is there anything inside of me that is causing a hesitation? And if there is, you should pay attention to that tension. Now, we don't like tension very much, right? Not many people that I know like tense moments in their lives. But maybe we need to learn to sit in that tension for a little while. Because here's what will happen. That tension may go away. It may go away and you go, yeah, I feel okay about this now. I paused, I thought about it, I feel okay about it, and there's no reason not to move forward. Or we may come to the realization that that purchase really isn't a good idea. But either way, we need to learn how to sit in that tension for a while to make certain that we are making a wise decision. I think most of us in here, at least the adults in the room, can probably look back on our lives and have at least one financial decision that comes to mind where we kind of knew this probably isn't the best idea. It probably isn't the right thing for me to do, but we did it anyway. And we look back with regret. We look back with regret, wishing that we would have listened to our gut, listened to that person that was trying to give us good, sound advice that would cause us to rethink things. We need to pay attention when there is tension in our lives, when there is cause to pause before we move on. And when we do that, we can and we will make better decisions when it comes to our money. Which leads us into this next question, this last question that we should ask ourselves when it comes to our finances. What is the wise thing to do? What is the wise thing to do, right? And this really is a question about maturity, right? When it comes to our money, it's a question about maturity with that. And so the question forces us to look a little bit farther down the road as opposed to what is happening right now in front of us. And the Apostle Paul in Ephesians, he offers some advice here in chapter 5, and he says this. He says, be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. We can get caught up in so many things in our culture and in our society that say it's okay. Everyone else is doing it. Everyone else is buying it. That we can get in some real financial trouble. And maybe so much trouble that we aren't able to come out on the other side. Maybe it leads to bankruptcy. Maybe it leads to a foreclosure. See, in order to answer this question well, we need to ask ourselves a few leading questions as well. In light of my past experiences, in light of my current circumstances, and in light of my future hopes and dreams, what is the wise thing to do? But it goes even a step further than that. Not just what is the wise thing to do, but what is the wise thing for me to do? Because my life is different than your life. And your circumstances are different than my circumstances. And maybe our hopes and dreams for the future don't look exactly the same. And so when we think through those three questions, when it comes to money, what is the wise thing to do for me? Not for everyone else, but for me. What is the wise thing to do? Paul tells his readers in Corinthians, he says, you say I have the right to do anything, but not everything is beneficial. Can we spend however we want? Paul says yes, but he urges his readers to ask more questions. When it comes to making decisions with our money, and really any decisions in our lives, Paul says everything's permissible, but not everything is beneficial. So can I do this? Can I make this purchase? Yeah, you can. But is it wise? Well, that's a whole different question. Our view of money tells a whole lot about who we are. It tells a whole lot about who we are. But if we can learn to be wise and ask these questions with our finances and allow our Heavenly Father to lead us and guide us, it will lead to a life that is much fuller and richer than you could ever imagine. The kind of life that Jesus said, I want you to have life and have it to the full. So as we close this morning, the band is going to lead us in one more song. And we want to give you an opportunity to respond during this time. And so we want to invite you, and it doesn't have to be anything necessarily dealing with money, but maybe you're just going through some stuff, or somebody in your family is going through some things. We count it as a privilege to pray with you each week. And so if there's something going on that you want to leave a prayer request, you can go to any of the stations around the room and write that prayer request down and pin it to the cross, and the staff will be praying along with you this week. Maybe you want to light a candle this week as a way of asking God to shed light maybe where you are not making wise decisions, and shed light on where you can make better decisions in your life. Or you're free to take communion as well at your seat and thank Jesus for what he has done in your life and where he's leading you. Hey, would you pray with me? And then the band's going to sing. And as the band sings, you can respond. Jesus, thank you so much for who you are and what you do in our lives, and that you want us to have a life that is full. You want us to have life. You said life to the fullest, life abundantly. And it's really hard to do that when we're controlled by money. It's really hard to do that when we're consumed by debt, then when we're a slave to the lender. And so, Jesus, you don't want something from us, you want something for us. And so I just pray as we are talking about how do we make wise decisions, that when it comes to our personal finances, that we won't just make decisions and not think through them, but God, that we will begin asking questions. And what is the wise thing? Not for everybody else, but what's the wise thing for me to do? And if we have tension, that we'll pause and we'll check through that. God, you want the very best for us. And I pray that as we go through and we are making decisions, God, that we will make wiser decisions and have fewer regrets. We love you, and we thank you, and we ask all these things in your name. Amen.
Thanks so much for joining us today. If you love the content you heard and you'd like to know when the new content becomes available, scroll down and like and subscribe to our channel. Again, thanks so much for being here today, and we can't wait to see you next week.